Hello, I'm Mike Day, Dealer Service Representative here at AGWS, and welcome to our June AGWSU F&I Insights webinar. Today, Bob Harkins, our Vice President of Training, will be covering developing a compliance management system and AGWSU/AFIP compliance checklist and dealer aid solutions. If you have any questions or comments, please type them in the panel on the right. We will address them as they come in. For follow-up questions, you can email those to bharkins@agws.com. So with that, I will turn this over to Bob.
Thank you very much, Mike Day. Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to F&I Insights, where as always, our goal is to work with and help our agent partners and dealer clients to maximize F&I and lease income, service contract income as well, service department, and as always, to do it the right way, and that is in a manner that's consistent with good customer relations and sound business practices. Before we get involved with the CMS compliance management system, let's take a quick look at our webinar series flyer. Just a couple of comments on here. This is webinar number 22 in our series. We date back to January of 19, then all through 19 to 2020, and now into 2021. So we want to thank you for your support, your feedback, your comments, and you're the ones that really make this work well for us as far as the things that we talk about. Just a comment or two about last month's webinar. The May webinar, we talked about in part the digital retailing and the F&I process and how that ties into value-added objection handling and being conversational selling and audible ready. Because of that, we are going to revisit that topic again for our July webinar. My good friend Ed Stewart, his company is Audible Ready Solutions, will be joining us, and we're going to tackle just that, conversational selling and being audible ready, and tie it into value-added F&I sales presentations and also value-added objection handling. So mark your calendar, second Wednesday in July, and we'll be back into conversational selling and being audible ready. And our goal with this program, as always, is to provide you with what we call an on-demand 24/7, 365 finance and insurance and compliance training program that helps you work and complement, COMPLE, complement your training activities with your dealer clients throughout the country. So anything that you need from us as far as you review previous or past webinars, you can do that from our website. Contact me. I will contact Annie Zito in marketing, and we can forward you the slide information that you need, the PowerPoint information to conduct training sessions yourself, or if you'd like to do it with me, we can kind of do it together for an organization. And we're doing a lot of that around the country. Okay, Mike, with that, let's get to the CMS. Here we go, CMS 10-step checklist, creating a compliance process. This really goes back to a number of years, dating back to Dodd-Frank, and the fact that dealerships that come under the direction of the CFPB are required to have a CMS or compliance management system in place. So maybe a great place to start is, how do we define a CMS? The information that I'm giving you primarily today from a CMS standpoint is from two very credible sources. Number one, the law firm of Hudson Cook, and specifically Hudson Cook attorney Patty Covington, and things that she's written about developing a CMS. And last but certainly not least, our good friend Terry O'Loughlin. As you know, I quote Terry a lot in our webinars. Terry O'Loughlin is the Director of Compliance for Rentals. He's an attorney, former Assistant Attorney General from the great state of Florida. So what is a CMS, a compliance management system? The answer, a CMS is a formal written program, keyword being written, because if it's not written, you don't have the documentation. And as we like to say, documentation always beats just conversation. So a CMS is a formal written program that's built into every stage or phase of your dealership operation. And when we say that, we're talking about from advertising to sales to F&I and back-end processes. So every phase of your operation, advertising to sales to F&I and back-end process. What we also know is that the basic concern of regulators, both the federal, state, and quite frankly now even local, is the answer to two questions when it relates to compliance in your store. Question number one, is there a structure around compliance? Is there a structure around compliance? And number two, is it integrated into dealership operations? So number one, is there a structure around compliance? And number two, is it integrated into dealership operations? And that's really what a compliance management system, CMS, can really do for you. As Patty Covington says, the Hudson Cook attorney, a CMS includes taking four interconnected steps. Step number one requires executive oversight. Executive oversight means the dealer principal, or if you're a public company, that would be your board of directors of that public company. So step number one is executive oversight and the appointment of a compliance officer for your organization. Mega dealer group, you have a compliance officer, or when we get to red flags and safeguards, a program coordinator that's responsible for those programs as well. Bottom line, that executive oversight, what we find and know is that if you have dealer commitment, typically you're going to have management support. And if we have dealer commitment and management support, and that shows that management cares about compliance and ethics, everybody else in the organization, everybody else in the store will probably care as well. So four interconnected steps. Step number one is executive oversight and the appointment of a compliance officer. Step number two is writing a number of written, again, not verbal, but written compliance programs. And these written programs, quite frankly, I like to say, become the nuts and bolts of your CMS. Written policies and procedures for safeguards, for red flags, for F&I, for sales, also for fixed operations as well. Written compliance programs, the nuts and bolts of your CMS program. Number three is to develop a complaint resolution program. So the key to handling complaints, taking care of them, repeat and referral business is to get involved early, get involved quickly. So develop a complaint resolution program. It's designed to log, to track, to investigate and resolve complaints. That's what it's all about, those four areas. A resolution program for complaints designed to log, track, investigate, resolve complaints, and have those people back for repeat and referral business as well. So that is step number three. Number four is compliance audits. And the recommendation of Hudson Cook and also Terry O'Loughlin as well is to at least on an annual basis, have an independent compliance audit once a year. It's fine if dealership personnel and do audits regularly. I mean, that could be monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, whatever. Many of our agent partners I know will do and work on audits in stores. But the key is, in case we're ever challenged by a plaintiff's attorney, a regulatory agency, whatever, when it comes to the audits, they will probably bring up the term being objective or objectivity. Being objective and objectivity, and also eliminating conflicting self-interest. And it's hard to do that or prove that if we're doing it just with people that are in-house or in the store. So once again, the recommendation, independent compliance audit, at least annually. Someone comes in, that satisfies the objectivity issue in almost every case, and you're eliminating any conflicting self-interest as it relates to your audit. Really, when we go back to the safeguards rule and really red flags as well, it takes us back to the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Privacy Act. The Privacy Act with Gramm-Leach-Bliley goes back to 2001. The privacy rule and giving out privacy notices began, quite frankly, on July 1, 2001, and that deals with how you share your customer information. The privacy rule, it deals with how you share your customer information. And remember, all the privacy notices that you've been giving out since day one, your privacy notices in part say, we maintain, the dealership, we maintain procedural safeguards that comply with federal regulations to guard and protect your non-public personal information. So NPPI. Privacy notices say, we maintain procedural safeguards that comply with federal regulations to guard and protect your non-public personal information. So privacy notices, the privacy rule deals with how you share customer info. Safeguards rule has been around since July of 2001. Again, it's the second main part of the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, and it deals with how you protect your customer information. So privacy rule deals with how we share customer information. Safeguards rule deals with how we protect that customer information as well. Okay, back to our 10-step checklist. Let's go through some of this and get into some nuts and bolts of this and some recommendations for you as well. Again, information from Hudson Cook attorney Patty Covington and also our good friend Terry O'Loughlin, Director of Compliance for Reynolds and Reynolds. So number one is to appoint appropriate compliance personnel. Appoint appropriate compliance personnel. Those are requirements. They're not requests. They're not suggestions. They're requirements. The safeguards rule currently says that that person should have the title program coordinator. So if you're a mega dealer group, more than one store, you should have a program coordinator for each store in your group. Again, that's part of the safeguards rule. I will tell you, we've been saying this for several months now, hasn't happened yet, but NADA and others say that it's still going to happen by the end of the year, is significant changes and enhancements, things that we have to do relating to compliance with the safeguards rule. And one of those changes, when that happens, is the program coordinator title is going to be replaced or changed, and the title will be Information Security Officer. Information Security Officer. So I fully believe that before the end of the year, we're going to see a real run on dealerships hiring people that are qualified to be an Information Security Officer. And again, if you're a mega dealer group, you have more than one store, you may have one person that's over all of your dealerships. That person's title would be a Chief Information Security Officer. So you may have a Chief Information Security Officer for the entire organization, your mega dealer group, your mega stores, but also an Information Security Officer for each individual store as well. So safeguards rule right now, a requirement to have a program coordinator. Red flags rule, if you're a public company, most of you probably on with us today or not, but if you're a public company, the responsibility for compliance with the red flags rule rests with the board of directors, or an appropriate committee of that board of directors. Most of us are probably not with public organizations, so what the red flags rule means is that someone from the level of senior management, and that's the two key words that's part of the red flags rule. Someone from the level of senior management, has to be involved and responsible for the implementation of the red flags rule. So number one, appoint appropriate compliance personnel for both safeguards and red flags. Number two, again, it's a requirement. It's not a suggestion. The requirement is to conduct risk assessments. You have to have risk assessments completed for both the safeguards rule, that's a requirement, and also a risk assessment for your red flags rule as well. A little bit later, when we get into the NADA material and AFIP material specifically, as we talk about the AFIP, Dealer Aide Solutions, as it relates to non-public personal information, we're going to get into the risk assessment and some recommendations to you with respect to that. So risk assessments are a requirement. Number three is the requirement to create, again, here's the written word again, to create a written information security program. A written information security program. That's not a new rule. That's been around since the inception of the safeguards rule. That goes back to May of 2003. And that's an FTC safeguards rule requirement, and that is to have a written information security program. I'm amazed at how many stores, quite frankly, it's 18 years after that, still don't have a written program, or quite frankly, they have the one that they did maybe in 2003 or 2004, but they've never really looked at it on any kind of a regular or periodic basis to make sure that it's up to date. So number three, from a safeguard standpoint, May of 2003, a written information security program. There's five required elements. There's five required elements with response to what should be in that written information security program. Let me share with you what they are. Five required elements of the safeguard rule. And again, this would be in writing as part of your program. Number one, again, is to designate the program coordinator or program coordinators. So who are they and what stores do they represent? Number two, the requirement to conduct risk assessments for each store. Number three is the requirement to develop a written information security program. So that's number three of the five required elements. Number four, you have the responsibility under the safeguards rule to oversee service providers. That's a big responsibility, oversee service providers. What NADA's Paul Mitri tells us, that when the new ruling and new recommendations and really law comes out with respect to safeguards later this year or next year, the overseeing of service providers is going to be greatly expanded from the standpoint of what the dealership requirements are, and probably greatly expanded as it relates to the cost for the dealer to comply with that. So number one, designate a program coordinator requirement. Number two, conduct risk assessments. Number three, a written information security program. Number four, oversee service providers. And last but not least, number five, for the safeguards rule, you're responsible for reviewing and updating that program periodically. And the word in the rule is the word periodically. So it doesn't say directly it has to be done once a year or every 6 months or every 5 years, whatever. It should be done periodically. I would say if you have any issues or negative things happen with respect to your safeguards rule, then obviously that would maybe trigger the update automatically as it relates to changes and updates with respect to that. So again, the safeguards rule, 5 required elements as it relates to your written information security program. Number 4 is the responsibility requirement to create a written, I call it the ITPP, which stands for the Identity Theft Prevention Program. Identity Theft Prevention Program. That really came into play responsibility-wise, initially to be valid and requirement-wise in November of 2008. Then with all of the extensions and changes and just dealers not being ready, that was delayed all the way up to now what it was to December 31, 2010, as far as the date for the red flags rule, December 31, 2010, as it relates to exact dates. The safeguards rule has 4 required elements. The safeguard rule, the red flags rule, has 4 required elements. And what are those 4 required elements? I use the acronym or the initials ID, R, and R. I stands for identify. The first thing you have to do under the red flags rule are identify the red flags that are unique to your store. We have to identify the red flags that are unique to your store. When you get information with respect to the red flags rule, whether it be from NADA, your attorney, AFIP, other sources as well, it's interesting to just look at what the definition of a red flag is. A red flag is a pattern, practice, or specific activity. A red flag is a pattern, practice, or specific activity that indicates the possible existence. Notice those 2 words. That indicates the possible existence of identity theft. So a red flag really doesn't have to be occurring, or it hasn't had to have already happened to be in violation of the red flags rule. A pattern, practice, or specific activity that indicates the possible existence of identity theft. So 4 required elements with respect to that. Identify the red flags. The great news is the Federal Trade Commission, in their publication with respect to red flags rule, gives us a total of 26 illustrative examples of what dealers would probably want to look at as they develop their red flags for their organization. I will tell you, over the years in the stores that I've worked in, or worked with, I should say, to help them put their ITPP together, their Identity Theft Prevention Program, they've chosen in most stores, I would say 15 to 18 of those 26 illustrative examples that the FTC gives for red flags. Then, of course, based upon your organization, your store, what's happened previously, what's happening now, you may want to add another 3, half dozen, or whatever red flags that are unique to your organization. So there's no requirement for any specific number, but you can get a lot of help from the illustrative examples already that have been provided. There's 26 of them by the Federal Trade Commission. So we have to identify the red flags for the store. And then after we've identified them, the D stands for detect. Detect what red flags would be unique to your organization. Detect maybe which of these red flags have already happened in the past, even before we use the term red flags, and detect what's happening in your store with respect to that negativity. So identify and detect the appropriate red flags. Number 3, the R stands for respond. And our response is we have to write the written program. So the written program, again, is the written identity theft prevention program known as the ITPP. And last but not least, the last R stands for review. Now, unlike the safeguards rule, where the requirement is to review that rule periodically, the red flags rule is a bit more demanding. It's a requirement. It's a requirement to review and update the red flags rule annually, and then you have to report that update to the dealer principal if you're not a public company, and if you are a public company, it has to be reported to the board of directors. So the red flags rule, unlike safeguards, requires an annual report given to the dealer principal. Public company, the report is given to the board. So numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 are requirements of the Federal Trade Commission, as is number 5, which is compliance with the FTC address discrepancy rule. The compliance with the FTC address discrepancy rule. This rule applies to dealers who order consumer credit reports. That's probably almost 100%. It applies to dealers who order consumer credit reports. What that means is, from a notice of address discrepancy requirement, if you submit that application to the credit reporting agency, and they come back and say to you that, hey, the credit report that they have on file, there is a substantial difference, difference in the address information, they're going to hit you with the notice of address discrepancy. Now, once the finance source has done that, they've now relieved themselves of their responsibility, initially under the address discrepancy rule. Now the onus falls back to you, the dealership, and what you have to do is prove to them and show them and be factual that the address that the customer gave you, the address on your credit application, other information, whatever, really goes with that report from the credit reporting agency. So, you know, a transposing of numbers, whatever, is probably not a big thing, but when it gets completely different as to parts of town or different cities, states, zip codes, whatever, then obviously those are things that have to be corrected. Now, when we do this, and really I think of it as part of the red flags rule as well, the address discrepancy report, you have to clear all red flags. You have to clear all red flags, and what you have to do with respect to address discrepancy is clear that as well. So this has to be cleared, and the law says we have to do that before a covered account can be opened. And the definition of a covered account is a retail installment sale contract or a consumer lease agreement. So we have to comply with the FTC address discrepancy report. So numbers 1 through 5 are requirements as it relates to the Federal Trade Commission. Number six is establish a process for OFAC checks. OFAC is the Office of Foreign Assets Control, and the requirement to check all business transactions against what's referred to as the specially designated nationals and blocked persons list. The specially designated nationals and blocked persons list. And the law requires that we check that list as of the date of the transaction. The date of the transaction would be the date that the customer signs the retail installment sale contract or the consumer lease agreement. What I think that also means is that for many transactions at a store, we may be required or should be checking OFAC twice. For example, if I'm in today and shopping and just looking around and deciding on a vehicle, whatever, and maybe you have to get it from another source or location or add certain things that I want, whatever, we certainly don't want to have to go through that from a cost and time standpoint if I'm a bad guy. So today you would probably check me against the OFAC list, especially designated nationals and blocked persons list. Today's what, Tuesday? Maybe I'm coming back in on Friday to sign the retail installment sale contract or consumer lease agreement. That would be the date of the transaction. So the law requires that for sure on that date, we have to check OFAC as of the date of the transaction to see if I am on the OFAC list and if there are any a number of similarities or exact matches before you complete that sale. If there are a number of similarities or exact matches, and hopefully we know this, we are required by OFAC to call the OFAC hotline. A lot of stories around the country I've heard about what's happened in calling the OFAC hotline. The OFAC hotline number is 1-800-5 1-800-540-6322. It's 1-800-540-6322. So they will tell you how to handle that deal. If we have to stop the transaction, we notify the customer, we give them an adverse action notice, and on the adverse action notice, we respond to that was an OFAC hit as the reason for the adverse action. We have to report that transaction to OFAC and keep a copy of that report for 5 years. So there's a lot involved in stopping that deal and responding to OFAC checks. Penalties are severe. With OFAC, you have both criminal and civil penalties. From a criminal standpoint, if you're arrested and being involved in OFAC, from a criminal standpoint, the jail time is up to 30 years. The jail time is up to 30 years. That would be federal penitentiary. And the fines are up to $10 million against corporations and $5 million against individuals. So the OFAC jail time is up to 30 years, criminal penalty, fines up to $10 million against corporations and $5 million against individuals. Now, civil penalties, they're not small. Civil penalties adjust annually. And now the civil penalty for OFAC is in excess of $1,400,000 plus as it relates to civil penalties relating to OFAC. But again, the requirement is to check every transaction against the specially designated nationals and block persons list. And the requirement is to do that as of the date of the transaction. And it requires checking all transactions regardless of the dollar amount. So don't fall into the trap of not checking cash deals and this, that, and the other thing. Every transaction has to be checked as it relates to the Office of Foreign Assets Control. So establish a process, if you haven't done it, for OFAC checks. Next, number 7 is to comply with the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, cash reporting rule, and money laundering statutes. The IRS cash reporting rule has been around since the 1980s. And initially, cash was defined as currency only. Then in the early 90s, 1992, a definition of cash was changed. Traveler's checks, money orders, bank drafts, and cashier's checks. Traveler's checks, money orders, bank drafts, and cashier's checks, when they have a face value of an even $10,000 or less, and then when added together with each other and or with my cash, they now total more than $10,000. I have to report that transaction to the IRS. Quick word, though, first about the money laundering statutes. Money laundering statutes, first of all, money laundering is not a misdemeanor. Money laundering is a felony. That means it's a criminal offense. The jail time for money laundering is up to 20 years. The jail time for money laundering is up to 20 years in the federal penitentiary, and the fines are heavy. The fines are up to $500,000. That would be $500,000. Fines up to $500,000, and the fines can be levied against both the individuals involved, as well as the dealership organization. So money laundering statutes are some real teeth. They're a felony. They're not a misdemeanor. A jail time up to 20 years. Fines up to $500,000, $500,000 levied against both the individuals involved as well as the dealership corporation. So don't get tied up or involved with a money laundering situation. The IRS cash reporting rule affects our dealerships. Let's talk about 3 or 4 things, or 4 or 5 things. The IRS cash reporting rule affects our dealership when we take in more than $10,000 in cash. The phrase is more than $10,000 in cash. Ladies and gentlemen, the key words in that phrase are the words more and cash. $10,000 by itself is not more. I would not have to report an even $10,000 deal unless for some reason I think that it is a suspicious transaction. $10,000 and a penny, however, is more. I'm required by federal law to report that. More than $10,000 in cash. We've defined cash already. Cash is always U.S. and foreign currency, but it's also traveler's checks, money orders, bank drafts, and cashier's checks. When each of these items individually is for an even amount of $10,000 or less, but then when added together with each other or with my cash, they now total more than $10,000. I'm required to report that transaction to the IRS. Which brings us to step number 2. I have to complete what's referred to as IRS Form 8300/FinCEN Form 8300. IRS Form 8300/FinCEN Form 8300. FinCEN, FIN-CEN stands for the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. Number 3, I have to complete that within 15 days. Within 15 days of the receipt of the cash that takes me over $10,000. I also have to keep a copy of that for 5 years as well. So within 15 days, I have to report it. IRS Form 8300 / FinCEN Form 8300, and keep a copy of that for 5 years. Now, what happens if I don't do it and I get hit with some negative things? Number 1 would be intentional disregard. Intentional disregard of the cash reporting rule, meaning not reporting the transaction to the IRS. These penalties adjust annually, and the new amount for 2021 for intentional disregard of the cash reporting law, the new amount is $28,260. Last year, that was $27,820, so it goes up every year. But this year, 2021, is $28,260, or the dollar amount that you were required to report but failed to do so, up to a maximum now for 2021 of $113,000. That 113 is an increase from last year's $111,000. So again, how that works is if you have a deal that you should have reported and didn't, you get hit with intentional disregard. Maybe the dollar amount is $52,000. Your fine is not $28,260. Your fine is not $113,000. Your fine would be the $52,000. So intentional disregard of the cash reporting laws. Don't let that happen to you. Minimum $260, $28,260, or the dollar amount that you were required to report but failed to do so, up to a maximum of $113,000. Now, on top of that is the negative word of structuring. Structuring is a felony, and you structure a deal when you advise a customer of a way or ways to avoid the cash reporting requirements. So you structure a deal when you advise a customer of a way or ways, a way to pay for the vehicle to avoid the cash reporting requirements. For example, the customer wants to pay you in cash. By definition, you send them back down to the bank to deposit the money and bring you back a personal check. You've structured the deal. Structuring is a felony. Structuring is a felony. The jail time is up to 5 years, and the penalty for structuring has now gone up for 2021, and now it's $1,130,500. It's $1,130,500, and that's also up to 5 years in jail. So don't be involved in structuring deals, advising customer of a way or ways to avoid the cash reporting requirements. So number 7, the requirement. Comply with the Internal Revenue Service cash reporting rule and money laundering statutes. So there's plenty of help you can get from a number of sources to help you develop your written policy statement with respect to that as part of this overall CMS or compliance management system. Then every time you do training in a store, you want to document that training. That may be just through discussion, through quizzes, through handouts. Sign it, date it. It goes in the HR personnel file for each person attending the training session, and that's our protection in case we're ever challenged by any state, federal, or local regulatory agency as it relates to the training that we're doing, perhaps for compliance with the rules and regulations as it relates to C&E compliance and ethics. Number 8 is consider adding a compliance component to compensation plans. Consider adding a compliance component to compensation plans. Talk with your attorney, your house counsel before you do that. You might consider if you do it, you're rewarding for compliance. And a lot of stores have found that when you reward for compliance, it becomes an instant priority. So add a compliance component to compensation plans. Talk to your attorney, your house counsel with respect to that. Number 9, we've really kind of already covered, and that is conduct annual compliance audits. That annual compliance audits from an outside source, in addition to any leadership self-audits that you do, but the outside independent consultant or counsel that comes in and does that will help you eliminate any charges or effect of the fact that you were not objective, that there wasn't enough objectivity, and also any conflicting self-interest as it relates to that. So again, outside independent audit, at least on an annual basis. And then number 10, effective CNE program, effective compliance and ethics program or programs. And what that means really is creating written policies and procedures. And the key word is written. Documentation beats conversation. Written policies and procedures for sales and F&I. So that may be having part of your compliance management system, really a job description or duty roster for sales. The same thing for finance and insurance. Maybe for F&I, you talk about the fact and have listed the 5 areas of responsibility that your finance and insurance manager or department is responsible for. Number 1 being compliance and ethics. Number 2 being sales. Number 3 being management. Number 4 being the financial function, and also administration, number 5 as well. So compliance and ethics, and the protection of the dealership, CNE number 1, sales number 2, management, administration, and the financial function number 4, the areas of responsibility, and have that be part of, in writing, your CMS or compliance management system. Then last but not least, 10B is some kind of certification to confirm formally or verify something. AFIP, as you know, has been around since 1989, has an excellent track record, has an excellent certification program. Now, I believe it's in excess of 60,000 people that Dave Robertson and his team has certified as it relates to AFIP certification. They also have a relatively new program called ADCO. That's the Association of Dealership Compliance Officers. So if you have a compliance officer in your store or considering the appointment of one, the ADCO program could be an excellent value add for you as it relates to that person's indoctrination and training, AFIP certification, and then institute training at all levels. And certainly there are other certification programs out there as well. ACE, Automotive Compliance Education, is very good, is excellent as well. There's others available around the country, but certification takes your game to the next level, the next notch. Bottom line is creating that CMS or compliance management system. And to give an idea of how important that is, and also what Hudson Cook attorney Eric Johnson has written about that CMS. Eric Johnson is a Hudson Cook attorney. We use his name and his writings a lot as it relates to many of our webinars for the past several years. And in December of 20, Eric Johnson wrote, and it's a cover article in Spot Delivery Newsletter. And the cover article, the title, what does a Biden-Harris administration mean for auto sales and finance? So if you're a Spot Delivery subscriber, pull up and look at the December 2020 issue, and the cover article, page 1, written by Eric Johnson, what does a Biden-Harris administration mean for auto sales and finance? Eric, by the way, is a partner in the Oklahoma City office of Hudson Cook, and he's also the editor-in-chief. Eric Johnson is the editor-in-chief of Spot Delivery as well. So if you have that issue, part of that article, the last paragraph, the title of that last paragraph is How to Prepare. And I think what he's written in this last paragraph really ties into exactly what we talked about. A little bit lengthy, but let me read it to you. How to prepare. Here we go. If you're a dealer or dealership, think about this, or a compliance officer, newly appointed. If you've spent the past 4 years being lax in your compliance efforts, it's not too late to act. That's the great news. What can you do? A solid deal jacket review could help you find some consumer-facing issues. If you don't have a compliance management system, CMS, put one in place. If you do have a CMS, make sure it's updated and tracks your actual policies and practices. Review and update if needed. Here we go. Review and update if needed your safeguards policy and your identity theft prevention program. That would be the red flags policy, as we discussed. Finally, it's a big finally recommendation. Finally, if you haven't adopted the NADA's Fair Credit Compliance Policy and Program and NADA's Voluntary Protection Products for Model Dealership Policy, you need to take a look at doing so. And finally, he says a call to your friendly compliance counsel would be a great place to start. So again, that's from Hudson Cook attorney Eric Johnson. And then the next month, and I want to share this with you because it gets into budgets. The next month, February, of 2021, 2 months later, really, February of 2021, he has an article beginning on page 8 that says, what's your compliance budget? What's your compliance budget in the store? And he compares that to what the budgets are now for the CFPB and the Federal Trade Commission for 2021. The CFPB's budget for this year, under the direction of Rohit Chopra. Rohit Chopra is the new director of the CFPB, appointed and named by President Biden, confirmed by the Senate, Rohit Chopra. But his budget for 2021 is $717.5 million. $717.5 million for the CFPB. The FTC's budget, relatively unchanged for 2021, and that would be at 330 million. So the question Eric has with those kind of numbers, what's your compliance budget in the store to kind of counteract that or think of that? But as I read to you the last paragraph from the previous article that Eric wrote, here's the last paragraph that Eric wrote with respect to the budget. And here we go. He says, if you're a dealer and you haven't adopted the NADA's Fair Credit Compliance Policy and Program and Voluntary Protection Products Model Leadership Policy, you need to look at doing so ASAP. And then he says, don't just do the minimum. Don't just do the minimum. I know a lot of stores that are using bits and pieces of those programs, but they haven't fully adopted it. So what Eric Johnson is saying, don't just do the minimum, fully adopt the program and the policies. Then he says, if you don't have a compliance management system in place, sound familiar, a CMS? If you don't have a CMS in place, that should be at the top of your to-do list. So you start there, your to-do list, the top of that. If you do have a CMS, make sure it's updated, taking into account the CFPB's CMS findings with regard to other companies, and ensure it tracks your actual policies and practices. And then Eric Johnson's final parting shot says, look, hey, given the huge federal budgets that you're up against, I have to ask you, what's your compliance budget in your store? So some great recommendations from attorney Eric Johnson. He heads up the Oklahoma City office of Hudson Cook, and is now also the editor-in-chief of Spot Delivery newsletter. So again, this 10-step checklist will either get you started if you haven't really looked at creating a CMS until now. You can make it 25 steps if you want, but if you really get involved and commit yourself to these 10 and work with your attorney, your house counsel, get some outside help from AFIP or someone else, you can develop a dynamite CMS or compliance management system for your store. All right, let's get into the AFIP programs, the Dealer Aide solution, and for non-public personal information. Next slide, Mike. All right, here we go. Attention, compliance officers, comptrollers, and office managers. Compliance checklist for the FTC mandated safeguards rule, red flags rule, and also the disposal rule. Produced by Dealer Aide, part of AFIP, and the NPI, of course, stands for non-public personal information. So it's Dealer Aide NPI Solutions, compliance checklist. Next slide, Mike. All right, at the top, if you can read this, page number 2 of the vulnerability checklist. The FTC requires franchise automobile dealers to implement a written customer information security program under the direction of an appointed corporate compliance officer, and update the program periodically. And that's effective May 23rd of 2003. And that, of course, would be the safeguards rule. Right below that, the Federal Trade Commission requires franchise automobile dealers to implement a written ITPP, Identity Theft Prevention Program, under the direction of an appointed corporate compliance officer, and to update their program periodically, effective December 31, 2010, and the red flags rule. In the last paragraph, it gets involved for the penalties of non-compliance and the things that we have to do. So this vulnerability checklist for these rules take about 5 minutes to complete. There's a series of yes or no questions. And under the safeguards rule, let me just share 4 of them with you. You may or may not be able to read that. But question number 1 says, does the store have a written information security program in place under the direction of a corporate compliance officer. If that answer is no, and you need some help in getting that done, perhaps this dealer aid solution program would be great for your organization. Drop down 3 questions. Do you limit access to customer information? Do you limit access to customer information to personnel who require access for their jobs? Having trouble determining how to do that? The AFIP program can help you with that. 2 questions down. Have physical or procedural changes concerning where non-public personal information is divulged, recorded, processed, or stored been noted in the updated information security program? Questions, concerns, thoughts about that? This program can help you. And then maybe one more question, 2 questions down. Are the required, and the key word is required, are the required door and desk locks? Are the required door and desk locks, computer passwords, and hibernation systems operative? The firewall is adequate and operative as well. So that's just 4 of the 15 questions under the safeguards rule that you might want to consider as to whether or not you need assistance as it relates to something like the dealer aid program from AFIP. Next slide, Mike. Okay, disposal rule and red flags rule. The disposal rule, 2 questions. The first one says, does the store have a written policy for disposing of non-public personal information recorded on paper or stored electronically that is updated periodically, abided by, and monitored? If your answer is no, you need some assistance, this solution is at hand for you. And then one more question, 2 questions down. Do you erase or destroy the hard drives of PCs, smartphones, and digital copiers and fax machines prior to discarding or trading them in? 2 of the 4 questions with respect to the disposal rule. And finally, last but not least, the red flags rule, 12 questions here. Let's look at the first question. Once again, does the store have a written ITPP, Identity Theft Prevention Program, in place under the direction of a corporate compliance officer? And then 2 questions down, does the corporate compliance officer, if that's you, do you prepare and deliver an annual report to the board of directors or dealer principal? That's a requirement of the red flags rule. So again, if you marked an X in any of the no columns there, not a problem because a solution is at hand. Next slide, Mike. And that solution is at hand, can be for you just that, dealer aid, non-public personal information solutions. First step, appoint a qualified corporate compliance officer. Step number 2, if you need assistance, contact dealer aid. That number, 817-428-2434. 817-428-2434, extension 954. If you want some personalized service with respect to updates on dealer aid NPI solutions, I would call Linda Robertson Direct. Linda Robertson Direct, and Linda's direct line number is 817-821-9636. If you want to talk to someone directly about dealer aid solutions, I would refer you directly to Linda Robertson at 817-821-9636, and she'll help you take it from there. Meaning one-on-one support from the start, review of both programs, how to complete your information, and give you instructions on completing a detailed risk assessment, tailoring the program to your specific needs, your particular store. So it's not just one size fits all, but tailoring the program to your specific needs, and then providing you with installation, but not only that, ongoing management information as well as it relates to reviews and updates for the duties of the corporate compliance officer. Mike, next slide, sir. Best of all, not only do they provide you with information that you can put signatures in and signs in your secure document area, customer notice about your commitment to the red flags rule and protection as it relates to identity theft. But the real bottom line, as it says in red, what this is giving you when it's completed is a single handed to a regulator binder that houses all NPI material in one place. Think about how proud you can feel in giving that to the regulator, the representative of the Attorney General's office, from the State Department of Insurance, whatever, if they come in and you're challenged. you have a single handed to a regulator binder that houses all of that information for you. Bottom line is you have that outside help to really put that together for you as it relates to that particular rule that you might be faced with or challenged. In this case, disposal safeguards rule or red flags rule as well. Again, all part of your CMS compliance management system. A definition of that: a formal written program that's built into every stage or phase of your dealership operation, from advertising to sales to F&I to back-end processes. Mike, next slide, sir. Before I yield back to Mr. Day to close this out, as we do on almost all of our webinars, we encourage you, agent partners and dealer clients, whatever, to develop a mission statement for your store, your organization, and then also a value statement for your organization as well. The mission statement that I share around the country and work with dealers in our 40 plus states, if they want help with this, is maybe think of a mission statement that sounds something like this. Every customer knows what they're getting, they agree to buy it, they know why they need it, and they feel good about it when they leave the dealership. Think about that. If we can pull that off with each and every customer and how that sets us up for repeat and referral business. A mission statement for your organization. Every customer knows what they're getting, they agree to buy it, they know why they need it, and they feel good about it when they leave the dealership. And then finally, as always, our American Guardian Warranty Services University training value statement, in case we're ever challenged by any state, federal, local regulatory agency, and I'm asked to present and share with them what our mantra is, what we teach, what we believe as it relates to finance and insurance and compliance training. It's really very simple. Mr. and Ms. Regulator, thank you for asking. At the American Guardian Group of Companies, we endorse and teach the industry standard and best practices that are recommended by NADA, by AFIP, and last but not least, our internal American Guardian Warranty Services Seller Code of Conduct for Retail Sales, which serves as a guide to the proper sales practices for all retail sellers of AGWS products. And by the way, backing up on that, when we say NADA, that also includes the other organizations that are really side by side with NADA. That would be NAMAD, the National Association of Minority Auto Dealers, and also the AIADA, the American International Automobile Dealer Association, which are our import dealers as well. So again, our value statement, we endorse and teach the industry standard and best practices that are recommended by NADA, AFIP, and our internal Seller Code of Conduct for Retail Sales, which serves as a guide to the proper sales practices for all retail sellers of AGWS products and services. So when you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, what's going on now with respect to what Rebecca Kelly Slaughter, the new chairwoman of the FTC, has said about eliminating and totally doing away with finance reserve, what Rohit Chopra has said about that as well, and their attack on products. A mission statement and a value statement is something that we should not treat lightly. So I would encourage you to touch with your attorney, your house counsel, regarding any of that information. With that, let me just finish with our normal disclaimer. Please remember everything that we discussed today. I'm not an attorney. I don't pretend to be. So nothing that I say, give, or show you is in any way intended as legal advice. It's simply to help you look at, evaluate, and if necessary, perhaps improve the overall effectiveness of your business policies, your business practices. With that, let me yield back to Mike Day. He will go over our webinar schedule with you and also a few final remarks as well. Thank you again, everyone. Have a great remainder of July and throughout this third quarter of 2021. Michael?
All right. Thank you, Bob, for the great information as always. As you said, here are the future webinar dates. So make sure to catch those. And then, as always, like and follow us on Facebook as all our latest news and events going on with us. So appreciate you guys showing up, and have a good one.